Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be introducing Dr. Pramath Raj Sinha to you. Yes, he doesn't wear that as a badge, but he is a PhD from University of Pennsylvania and has had a really interesting career trajectory. From being a consultant at McKinsey, he went on to found 9.9, a media company. He became a media consultant. But I think he found his true calling, and he talks about it later on as his passion in education. And he has a number of very unique, innovative educational initiatives to his credit. He was also the founding dean of the Indian School of Business and on its executive board. Now, as the founding dean, can you imagine the singular influence he had on shaping that institution? And you must remember that institution today is one of the top 20 in the world. Now, somebody building one of the top 20 educational institutions in the world is a great achievement, isn't it? It didn't stop there. He went on to found the Ashoka University, and he's the founder and trustee of Ashoka University, a liberal arts university. You've probably heard about it because that is setting standards in liberal arts education as well, especially with the Young India Fellowship and so on. And you'd think founding two such organizations would have been a tremendous achievement, right? In one lifetime. Most people achieve only one thing in one lifetime. He has now gone on to found Harappa Education, which is an online educational initiative. Now, the interesting thing about Harappa Education is he has done these tremendous higher education institutions, but he noticed a gap between work and education in our country. And foundational skills that could have been learned earlier, especially in school, are missing when people come to work. So that's what Harappa Education does, and that's what he's going to be sharing with us today. So you can all look forward to a very illuminating session. So we welcome Dr. Pramath Raj Sinha to take over from here.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much for that very kind and very perceptive introduction. Often people just kind of read off from some resume that one has sent, but I think you've gone through great pains to describe my career. Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. I also want to compliment you and the organizers in starting this off with the national anthem. That was very special. Not many people think of adding that touch to events like this, especially when we are going through such a tough time as a country and as a world. So I just want to compliment you on the thought behind that.
Yes, I must confess that I had goose pimples when that went, and the way it was done as well.
Yes, beautifully sung. Beautifully sung.
And I think this is the time to bring people together in the face of all that we are facing. And yes, it was quite inspiring. So let me start off with the first question. From watching your videos on Harappa Education, I can see that you're a great communicator, but more than that, very emotionally intelligent, which I think has helped you in shaping these institutions to become what they are. At which point did you come to understand that education was possibly your first calling?
Interestingly, David, took me quite late in life to realize that it was my first calling. Everybody talks about the fact that you should be doing what you're passionate about. You should find your purpose. That will make you really happy. I often find that, you have purpose staring you in the face and you don't realize that it's really what your purpose is. And I'm a living example of that. So as you mentioned, I did a PhD many long years ago. And I consider myself as a failure as an academic because when I was doing the PhD, I thought I would be an academic for all my life. And I did start out as an academic, but I actually hated being a faculty member in academia. Studying to be an academic was a lot of fun. I was in a very open environment because I was able to try out and explore lots of things. So I had a lot of fun and I imagined that my career would turn out like that. But I realized that once I took up a formal academic job, it was very restricting for somebody like me who likes to do multiple different things. And I found that I was learning more and more about less and less. And that's not how I wanted to live my life. So that's when I sold out, as my academic friends would say, to the world of business and joined McKinsey and then had a business career. Fortunately, about, I would say, 20 years into that career, it was well after ISB and Ashoka were done that I realized that I was unnecessarily trying to do both business and education. And really, I should focus only on education because that's where I had my greatest enjoyment and fulfillment. Once I realized that, then it was a process of unwinding my business involvement. Some of it is still there, but I can safely say that now I spend all of my time or most of my time focused on education. And that's been very fulfilling. This is probably around 4 or 5 years ago only. That's when I also started thinking about this whole idea of Harappa as well.
That's really interesting. So when did 9.9 happen?
See, David, 9.9 happened. I was at McKinsey, then I left to become the CEO of the Anand Bazar Patrika Group, which all of you would know about, given that you're from media. That didn't last a very long time. It was only about a year and a half. And then I started 9.9. So 9.9 is still around and it still has its brands and publications or now digital presence in terms of Digit, which is a very well-known brand in technology, as well as CIO and Leader, B2B specialty space. So that company is now about 13 years old, but I have focused now entirely on education. One of my co-founders and partners, Vikas Gupta, runs 9.9.
Okay. It's interestingly, when I was executive vice president of SIFI
Yes.
some years ago, I've actually visited the 9.9 office to meet people from Digit. So I was quite thrilled to see that it was founded by you. Okay. And how did you get to be the founding dean of ISB?
That's an interesting story, David. I was involved in setting up ISB well before ISB was launched in 2001 as a consultant at McKinsey. And it so happened that we had recruited 2 people, not 1, but 2 people, to be like Dean number 1 and Dean number 2. We thought we were being smart and cute. So we found 2 really good people. We said, okay, why don't we have both as leaders of this new institution? And we named one of them as founding dean and the other as an executive dean. As the date of the launch of the school got closer, one of them decided that he was not ready to take on the job. I'd like to joke and say that he chickened out. And the other person, in fact, got the offer to be the dean of Kellogg, which was one of our partner schools. And obviously, as a new school, we could not scuttle his chances of going out and heading what was at that time and still is one of the top 5 B schools in the world.
Right.
So 1 month from launch, we lost both our deans in succession. And the board had no alternative but to kind of ask me, and I also felt compelled to take care of the institution that I had been working on for the past 5 years. And I had been very involved in recruiting the first batch of students.
Right.
I did have a PhD, so I could masquerade as an academic. And fortunately, McKinsey allowed me to take a year's sabbatical. But I was very clear that I was not the right dean for the institution and that I would be there like a night watchman for 1 year, which is exactly what I did. But interestingly, that the board allowed me to keep the title of founding dean. They found a smart way of keeping me involved. And I also kind of enjoy that because I still think of that school as like a firstborn. And so I'm still very involved. But that's how the founding day title happened, though the association with ISB goes back to almost 5 years prior to that, which it took to build the school from an idea to completion in those days.
Is that where your focus on building institutions based on the ethos and culture of India came to be?
Yes, very much so, David. Though I would say that I did not realize that when I was building it. I have to confess that when I was building it, it was just a project, and it was trying to solve one problem and the next problem and the next problem. But it is true that we all got involved in it with a very strong sense of pride in correcting the perception that, you know, there could not be truly world-class institutions out of India in education. And I have to say that I did learn some lessons from a project that most people don't know about, which is that prior to that, I worked on a project to build what is existing today called Multimedia University in Malaysia. That was actually my first project in building an institution. At that time, I think I was a bit of a novice. You know, I was part of a McKinsey team that was working in Malaysia, and we had to build a university there. And naturally, because of my prior academic training, PhD, briefly failed, albeit academic, I was handed this project. I think I did a half decent job. That university is there, and it's got 8,000 students. It's a prominent university in Malaysia. I wasn't involved in building it brick by brick. I kind of did the business plan for it and as a consultant, and then they took over to build it. And I would keep going back to review progress on their invitation. And that gave me interesting insights on what to do and what not to do, and also what was possible. And that's when I started to work, and I think Rajat Gupta, who was the head of McKinsey at that time and was really behind the ISB project, he was much more senior, and he had seen the world, and he had seen the world from a very top high quality lens. So he also gave us the confidence to say, listen, we can make this truly world class from day one. We don't have to think about building C quality to go to B quality to go to A quality. And also because we are in India, we can't do A grade. His challenge to us, and I also by then had some belief that we can do A grade from day one, and we don't have to wait for decades to build a high quality institution.
Yeah.
So that's how the journey started on saying, how do we build something of high quality in India?
And how did you conceive of Ashoka University as a liberal arts education university? You know, in this country, the whole focus is on engineering and medical and all of that.
Yeah. See, multiple reasons. I think now that you look back, you know, the reasons are obvious, like you are saying, because the whole country is obsessed with what is loosely called STEM education, perhaps, and science and engineering. I'm a product of that, by the way. If you're a half decent student, that everybody nudges you to study science and math, maybe biology if there's some interest in medicine, and then you go do engineering. There's a perception that the best opportunities are there if you do engineering. There's still skepticism about when you study humanities and social science, what is your future? Maybe you go into civil services. So all of these perceptions were there even with me when I was growing up. I think here what happened was that after ISB's success, which was almost around 2006 and 7, when we showed up in the Financial Times ranking and immediately came in at number 20, when everybody woke up and said, really, we've heard of ISB, but really, is it that good? And some of that reflected glory started to come to me, and a lot of people would call me and say, listen, we also want to build something of this quality. Will you help us? And at that time, my attitude was, listen, I have not built anything. It's just one program. There's a 1-year PGP MBA. That doesn't qualify you to build universities and institutions. Please understand, I'm not trying to be humble, but it's just the fact that I've only built it's a one-trick pony, as people would say.
Yeah.
But then people kept coming back and saying, but what you've done is unique. And I would tell them about my learnings. Then I ended up writing a book about the ISB. People said, no, these learnings are unique and you're not realizing that this could be helpful to others, and please help. Then I started to think about, okay, if I'm going to do something, which is what I had learned at ISB, then I want to do something different and distinctive.
Right.
Even when we were creating ISB, there was a lot of pushback. There were 1,000 AICTE accredited business schools at that time already. So the question was, why build another B school? Do we need yet another MBA program? And we realized very clearly that we may be the 1001 or 1001st B school, but there was room to build a distinctive, unique B school. And so the 1-year program and the visiting faculty, high quality model, so on. So I had that in my head that, we need to, entrepreneurship, whether it's in education or in anything, is really about filling a gap. It's about solving an unsolved problem.
Right.
And like in the case of ISB, there were good MBA degrees around the world, and there were good liberal arts institutions around the world. But we could see that there was a strong trend of liberal arts students wanting to go abroad to study. And very quickly, the typical Delhi University, Mumbai University, Calcutta University, Madras University colleges would run out of seats. So there were some very, very good quality students who were forced to go abroad. And we had seen the same thing when we were doing ISB, that there were very, very good students who could not get into IIM, and then they were forced to go abroad because there was no other. So we could see that need very clearly. And of course, there's a lot of other philosophical points around the fact that, a liberal arts education is what I think we all need in times like this. So I'm not going there. Of course, those were also big drivers. Plus, my co-founders, Ashish Dhawan, Sanjeev Bikhchandani, Vineet Gupta, and several others, all had exposure to liberal education in the United States, either themselves or through their children or through their friends. And so had I, having gone to the University of Pennsylvania for my PhD, and we knew the value. We were confident that even a liberal education could make you very, very successful in your career. In fact, you needed it almost to make yourself successful in your career. And so those were some of the ideas that led us to create the Liberal Arts University. Interestingly, when we first started on the idea, we were thinking of building a university that would have all faculties like any university. So we were engineering and maybe law and other professional schools. But the financial crisis hit in around 2000, 2007, 2008. And we had to scale down our plans. And as they say, scarcity always breeds invention or innovation. Now we felt that we wouldn't be able to raise the philanthropic funding that we needed to build the school, and there would be nervousness. And so we had to really cut our cloth to size and decided that, hey, if there's one thing we would want to focus on, what would it be? And the answer popped out that we were all passionate about doing something different. We were passionate about doing something that solved an unsolved problem and filled a gap. And that indeed we were really passionate about a liberal arts education. And that's how the Young India Fellowship was born, and that Ashoka decided to stay focused on that.
I'm so happy to hear what you have to say about a liberal arts education. I spent part of my career in advertising. Yes. And David Ogilvy famously said,
yes,
to really do well in advertising, you need to have a liberal arts education. The more liberal, the better. So
Yes, he was actually a big proponent of this and a great problem solver, great innovator, very highly respected. I just saw his name somewhere on a list of top 10 ever problem solvers or something like that. And here's a liberal arts person. Steve Jobs used to obviously talk about this a lot. The combination of technology and liberal arts is really what we are seeing today, power the world in many ways.
That's really the success of Apple.
Yes.
So can you elaborate on the unique educational initiative you brought to the Himalayan region? I don't think many of us are aware of that.
Yes, it's a program that is close to my heart. I was approached by the Drukpa order, which is the Buddhist order that has always been Indian. A lot of people don't realize that the Indian Buddhism has been in India for many, many years, and the chief order there is the Drukpa order. So if you actually go to Bhutan, you'll see everything is Druk, right? Druk Air, Druk Hotels, Druk Jams, and so on. The order of the Dalai Lama actually came from Tibet. And that's a different order. So the Drukpa order has its seat and it's kind of its spiritual headquarters in a place called Hemis in Ladakh, just an hour from Leh, Ladakh. And the head of the order was somebody that I had gotten to know in the context of another engagement. And he suggested that we do something with education for the people of Ladakh and the Himalayan region. So that was an interesting proposition. And I've always been looking, as you can tell, for unique ideas. You know, we started a program for women only and so on. So when he came up with this, he said, let's build a college or a university. And I know how tough it is to start something of that scale. As you see, the big problem in all of these ventures is finding faculty. The students are there everywhere and very high quality students in our country. So I knew that if you had to set up a whole university or a college which had a 2, 3, 4-year program, it was going to be a nightmare, and to find permanent faculty in Ladakh and to go live there. So that's when I suggested to him that we do this 1-year model, which I had already mastered from my work at ISB, as well as at the Young India Fellowship at Ashoka and the Vedika program in Delhi for women. And we decided that we wanted, and I asked him what his mission would really be in building this institution. And his point was that, listen, I really want to preserve the culture and the ethos and the heritage of the region. And most of our people who are bright and smart and are very committed to the region, but are not finding the right opportunities.
Right.
And so they leave to go to the rest of India to get an education. And then they are not able to come back because they find opportunities are better outside. So we decided to create a program where we could get some of these people back. So let them go to Delhi University or to Bangalore or to Calcutta to study. But after they've done their undergrad, let's bring them back and let's get them re-engaged in the issues, in the local issues, and try to use that 1 year to create a business or to create an enterprise or a social enterprise or to build an initiative that allows them to engage and build productive, impactful businesses, enterprises for the region, in the region, and contribute back to the region, and to help solve some of the problems of the region, whether it is economic or employment or poverty or agriculture or climate. And so that's what we do. It's a program that's actually focused on entrepreneurship. So we teach them lots of subjects. We also teach them writing and communication and economics and business. But the focus is that from day one, they have to form groups and start to think about an enterprise that they are going to create locally that will have an impact in the region, and they would then continue to run and build those after they graduate from this program. And it's called the Naropa Fellowship. And we've just started our 3rd year and very excited about how that program is going. And very grateful for a lot of help and support that I've gotten from people around the world in making this program successful.
This conversation has been very illuminating, and I think I'm beginning to discern a thread where it is not really education that we're talking about, because everything that you've said is about equipping people to succeed in their lives after that education, in one way or the other. And I think that is what has led to Harappa education as well, because then you realize that the gap is probably in terms of equipping them with what they need. I won't go into details because I'm sure you're going to be sharing that with us, but very, very well thought through. But before we go there, what's the name of the book you wrote about building the ISB, and where can we get it?
It's called An Idea Whose Time Has Come. An Idea Whose Time Has Come. It's on Amazon and in the Kindle form. Okay. There are a few hard copies around. We haven't got it reprinted. Now everything has gone digital.
An Idea Whose Time Has Come. So listeners, if you really want to know the ISB journey, that's what you need to read.
Thank you for plugging my book.
And we'll now come to Harappa and the title of what you're going to be sharing with us, Building Foundational Skills, the Harappa education story. But before we go there, and I must say that we at Social Beat are particularly happy to be working with you in building this venture into what it can truly be in terms of empowering, hopefully, millions of people in terms of having successful careers. So how did you arrive at this business of foundational skills?
Well, David, it's my privilege to be working with all of you. I think you have so much experience in what you do that it's great to be partnering on this. I'm still a bit of a student as far as the digital space is concerned, and I'm with my white beard, I'm clearly out of touch and out of sync. See, the idea of these Harappa skills that we talk about is as old as our human race itself. We were all born to think, to problem solve, to communicate and engage and work with each other, to help each other. We were all built to, it's in our DNA as Homo sapiens or mammals of a higher order to be more self-aware, to constantly improve ourselves, and so on and so forth. And by the way, the heart of education, and especially higher education, was always the discovery of these faculties that human beings already had.
Right.
But you would discover and hone these skills. As you went through school, which was the early years of your education, that's when you were taught sort of the essentials that you need to know. In the old days, if people had discovered something about how the earth and sun and climate and moon and seasons worked, then they would teach those things because you needed to know what had already been known and discovered. So that's our curriculum today. You are taught how to count, how to do math, how to use language, history, geography, and so on. So school education is really making sure that you know the essentials to survive. But college education, and to some extent school education, was to help you discover yourself. Because the idea is not to cram you, David, to be the best manager or best coder or best digital marketer. But the idea of education was always to help you, David, discover the best in you so that you can go out and make magic happen. Because if you could do the best that you can be, which would be by discovering what you really want and what you're really good at, then magic will happen. Not by forcing you to do something that you have no interest in, or training you, however much training I give you. You'll never be the best at something that you're being forced to do for whatever reason. Now, this idea of helping young people discover themselves,
right,
and find their true potential has gotten lost over the years. We've crammed our education with so much for children to memorize and commit to memory, and we have not given them the space to also develop their faculties in these areas, which are natural to us. Calculus may not be natural to us, but thinking is natural to us. The ability to differentiate between fake news and real news is natural to us, but we haven't allowed our young people to develop those faculties. We haven't encouraged them to question. We haven't encouraged them to have their own views and respect the views of others. I started to realize that as I went through in life, and I've been grateful with my journey to say that, and like a lot of us, I got to play many roles, from being an engineer to a management consultant, to be a CEO, to be an entrepreneur, to be in education. I realized that what really helps you through all these are really these foundational skills, regardless of the sector. If today you employed me in your company and I know nothing about digital marketing, where will I start? I'll start by asking questions. I'll start by learning. I'll start by talking to people. I'll start by listening. I'll start by making notes and doing some research. Now, all of this is naturally there in us. So my effort was, how do we bring those out and go back to people and tell them, hey, we recognize and you know that this is important. Let me help you learn this because your education did not prepare you for this. And by the way, your employers, your bosses, your HR who promotes you and gives you higher compensation, the companies that want to give you a better job are all looking for these skills. So isn't it good if you could actually get some help in learning these skills? And that's what we are trying to do at Harappa. If I can say in layperson's language, that the skills that you have, I'm only trying to enhance them and bring them out and make it possible for you to say, listen, I can do this. I can do anything. Most of us have not done work in the areas that we were necessarily educated in. We've actually gone on to do very different things. I think most of the people in your team were not educated in digital marketing or advertising. They come from they must have studied history and science and journalism, and some may have done media and communications. So I think that's really the intent of Harappa, is to go back to the basics. That's why we chose the name Harappa, because it's an enduring legacy and a pioneering and a legacy of excellence that it provided. Some people also like to call these leadership skills at the end of the day, loosely termed. And in a way, I'm teaching leadership without calling it leadership, because leadership has certain sort of intimidating connotations that, I'm going to become a leader. We don't want people to think that somehow by doing these courses that I'm offering, that they'll naturally become a leader. But at least we can kindle their thinking and get them started on understanding that these are going to be very important in life. And, half the battle is won once you become aware.
Yes, I think you kind of elaborated on this whole concept very well. And it is true that school education system today is such that it actually stunts people in terms of essential life skills that they need to have, like communication and analytical thinking and creative abilities and so on and so forth. And it's really that gap that Harappa fills so beautifully. And it's also very interesting the way it's been organized, in terms of 5 habits and 25 skills. I think it's beautifully arranged in that way, where the 25 skills come under the 5 habits.
Yes.
So that people can pick and choose and build on their weaknesses to become strengths, as it were. So I think it's a sweet spot that you've identified, and you're where you're offering your services, because a lot of the training that we do, for example, in Social Beat, is aimed at those areas, because they're so absolutely necessary to a company that's in digital marketing, because it involves communication, it involves creativity, it involves emotional intelligence, analytical thinking, strategic thinking, and so on. So that's very well put. I think what we'll do now, Pramath, is look at what questions have come in so
Sure.
that we have a chance to respond to those as well.
Would you like me to go through them, or you want to pick them for me? How do you want to do it?
I'll read them out to you.
Yeah, let's do that.
The first question is, what policy should governments, central and state, think and implement in terms of liberal education to make it at par with engineering education, be it employability, financial stability, etc.?
I think the only policy that the government should do is to
stay away.
Yeah, to frame some broad rules and actually let people do what they have to do.
Yeah,
I think that in essence is what liberal education is about. Obviously, we don't want to have fly-by-night operators, and we don't want people to do the wrong thing. But the truth is that what has happened with the whole education sector is that we've stifled the sector by formulating rules and policies for the worst offender. And that has been very stifling. So the new education policy is a great step in that regard. It talks about multidisciplinarity and holistic education, which is really at the heart of a liberal education.
Right.
So I think I think people get it. I think we now have to implement it. And implementation to me is let the right people do what they have to do.
I think it'll be also interesting if you tell us how you managed to assemble such a phenomenal faculty for Harappa education. It's so wide-ranging, starting with Rajat Gupta onwards, and it's also very heartwarming to see a student of Ashoka University, a Young India Fellowship winner. It's very interesting to see somebody from ISB, educational institutions that you have actually built up, who are now on the faculty of Harappa education. So such a diverse group, how did you bring them together?
I think there, David, obviously, I'm grateful and privileged for the trust that people have in believing in me to say, listen, if I'm bringing them on board, it's for a worthwhile cause, and that I'm not going to misuse their name or their presence. So I think that I've been, I feel lucky to have had built that trust with them. But
it'll also be interesting to learn from you about what the traction has been for Harappa education, because this is filling a gap, a real felt need in industry today. And the interesting thing is it's felt on both sides. People who come out and are struggling to establish themselves in a career, and companies in terms of the employability of the people they're taking in. So how's the traction been in the meantime?
So the traction has been quite good, and obviously every entrepreneur likes to say that they are doing really well, but I will only say that it's been a difficult time too because of the pandemic. We had just launched late last year. We've been working on this for more than 2 years, but we had only truly gone to market and in a big way starting late last year after our funding came in. But the response has been great. The response in terms of people just signing up for our courses online. We've had people, over 100,000 people show interest in our courses, which is a staggering number. If you add up all the people who have gone through all the universities that I've been associated with, it wouldn't add up to that many. So while they haven't done full courses, the fact that you can so quickly get your name out and get people to be interested is amazing. I would say that on last count, some 20 to 30,000, I don't remember the exact numbers, students or learners would have taken or engaged and completed or in process of completing our courses. So that's been a very encouraging number. Our feedback from these folks has been great. We ask for feedback on a scale of 1 to 5, and overall across courses, and for most of our courses, our feedback has been in the 4.5 type of range on a scale of 5, which has been very heartening. Our completion rates has been very high. So a lot of what we have, David, are MOOCs, which are recorded courses. So they are completely what are called asynchronous. These are not live like we are doing right now. People actually take recorded on their own time and so on. So for MOOCs, people say completion rates are very low because people are not motivated to complete and they start and stop. But our completion rates have been very high. We see 70, 80, 90% completion rates. In some cases, we've seen 100% completion rates. And we take some credit for that because we solved for that by making our courses very engaging. We've learned from the mistakes that others have made. We also take a lot of feedback from people to say, hey, how can we make this more engaging? We've used a lot of behavior science principles that you all have been using in marketing to see how can we get people to form a habit. We find that people want to do these courses they spend about half an hour every day on our courses. So you are seeing a lot of data coming, and therefore based on that, we've been modifying what we have on offer, moving things around. So impact has been great. I think for us, the excitement now is, like people say, we think there's a very strong product market fit. Our big challenge now is to scale up. That was the whole reason of doing this online, because usually these kinds of skills are taught by trainers in the classroom. So right now, our challenge is to really scale this up and start to see hundreds of thousands of learners come online. And I'm confident that we'll be able to achieve that given the interest that I see out there.
Right. And what has been the age group of the vast majority of those who are coming on and doing the training? Is there an 80-20 principle at work? Or?
Yeah. So I would say that about 80% are in the age group of 18 to 45. When we first started, we kind of assumed that it wouldn't go up that far. We thought it would be more like 18 and late 20s. But what we've been pleasantly surprised is to see that older people want to take our courses. And part of it is exactly what we were talking about. Because we didn't get this kind of training or inputs in our early years, a lot of people are going back and saying, okay, now let me see what this is, because I haven't hitherto had exposure to this, or I missed out on getting exposure to this in my education or in my early years in the company. See, some of us have had the benefit of working in large companies which invested in learning and development. I can tell you that the large multinationals typically did a lot of this in a very systematic way. Every year, every 2 years, you had to go through a program and so on. Most people have not gone through something like that. So I think people are now realizing what they missed out on. And so they are going back. So that's why we have a range from about 18 to 45. And the split, that group is split roughly 3 ways, 18 to 25, 25 to 35, and 35 to 45. We see kind of a mix of people, equal mix in each 3, which has been very heartening and obviously means that we have to tailor to those higher, more mature audiences or learners.
Yeah. But it's very good to know that 63% or 66% of that 80% are the younger people, because they are building foundational skills, that means.
Yes, and David, you know this. We all also know this. As you grow older, it's harder to change the way you think and build habits. So that if you can start doing these things from a younger age, and it's been proven now in neuroscience as well, that your brain keeps growing and expanding through your 20s.
Right.
Later on, it becomes that much more difficult to reprogram your brain, as it were.
Yeah.
So it's great that we can catch them in their 20s. But I don't want to discourage people in their 30s and 40s from trying. And I hope that many of them will.
Okay, back to the questions. There's a question from Ashutosh that says that Harappa Education is using digital marketing to build the business. How has digital marketing helped to establish brands and grow educational ventures?
Oh, everything I've done is only digital. So if you today look at ISB or Ashoka or Vedika or Naropa or Harappa, you will not see anything in print or television. And we believe that in all of these, At least for these institutions, people are basically online. They are looking online, they are searching online, they are present online. And why should you waste your dollars or rupees on anything other than targeting them? Here you can target them very well. You don't need to waste, all of the great stuff about digital. So we have sworn by digital marketing in education for a long, long time. Now, obviously, there are many other people who can take advantage of our focus by selling us databases and large numbers and promising us things. And there are those as well. You have to be smart about it. But I think if you can be smart about it, this is the best way to basically, like right now, if I'm on this medium, on one hand, I see over 100 people on this webinar, but to the person who's sitting in their rooms watching me and you, David, it's almost like a one-on-one conversation. And I think that's what the digital medium really allows you, that regardless of the fact that you're going to hundreds of thousands of people, you're able to communicate to that very targeted audience and almost have a one-on-one conversation with them. And that's the power of this. Yeah.
Another question is, what challenges do you think institutes in India will have to face while adopting the revamped education policy?
Oh, lots of challenges. I think making room in the curriculum to do all of the things that the education policy is talking about, finding the faculty in the brick and mortar model that will be able to teach the kinds of things that the education policy is talking about. It's not easy to retool your existing faculty. So where are these people going to come from who are going to teach holistic skills or 21st century skills or multidisciplinarity and so on? And I think that the challenge has always been of quality, even if you found numbers. It's not enough. In today's day and age, getting a third-rate education is unacceptable. So how do you make sure that everybody gets a high quality education? And I think that's where technology is a huge leveler. It's a huge leveler. When you talked about our faculty at Harappa, I've always believed that the best faculty should be available to the last student.
Right.
What is this discrimination that just because I couldn't get into a top institution, I cannot access what a Nobel Prize winner has to teach? Everybody should have access to what the best faculty have to teach. Whether I can understand it and spend the time learning it and so on is my challenge, not yours. But at least you give me what the best is there to offer and leave it to me to decide whether I can master it or not.
Talking about technology, there's a question from Senthil Pandian. Are there any plans for Harappa to offer an executive management program in digital business transformation or technology management programs?
Yes, there is.
Yes, there is.
Yes, there is.
Could you tell us about it?
Well, it's coming. You see, when we created Harappa, David, Harappa is not going to be just about these foundational skills. Think of these foundational skills as your required courses, your foundation courses, your core courses. Around these, we want to build courses and programs in areas that are not just necessarily popular, but also build on these skills of critical thinking. Like you were saying, that these are skills that are very important in digital marketing. So we want to come at digital marketing from this point of view.
Right.
How do you think as a digital marketer? How do you communicate as a digital marketer? How do you work in teams as a digital marketer? How do you interact with clients as a digital marketer? So we want to come at it from that standpoint. And so from that lens and from that perspective, there are many journeys that can be thought of. And so technology and business, absolutely. I think the way management education is going, technology and business, all MBAs are going to become tech MBAs, is my view. Just as marketing and finance and operations and strategy were part of MBAs, technology, digital transformation are going to be part of any MBA program. Yeah. So we do want to create something that is a non-MBA MBA, which is offered online with Harappa, around Harappa's core courses and foundations.
Maybe we can work for you on the digital marketing part.
Yes, I'm sure you will.
just for your information, a gentleman called Daman, who's Vice President Growth at Boat, the Boat headphones company.
Yes.
He's an ISB alum from the 2005 batch,
Aha.
and he will be speaking on the session at 2 o'clock here today.
Oh, I see. Nice. I'll try and join in if I can. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be wonderful if you could do that. It's 11:54.
Yes, I may have run out of time, right?
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether to take any more questions or to allow you closing remarks. Shall we do one more question?
You are the boss.
What are your thoughts about 21st century skills for high school and teenage students?
My thoughts are yes, we have to do that. This is exactly what Harappa is doing. By the way, Harappa shouldn't exist.
Yeah, actually it shouldn't.
We shouldn't have a program or an entity like Harappa teaching these skills. They should be part of school and high school
Yes.
students. They should be taught first to students before we start teaching them anything else, or at least in parallel.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I think if we can really change the mindset of our designers of our curriculum, that is where the problem starts, right? Because high school certification, which is your CBSE, ICSE, whatever degrees whatever diploma you get at the end of school, is defined by the regulations, by the government. And they decide what should be taught for you to be considered a high school pass out. What they have crammed into the curriculum has made it difficult to have the space to do all of the things that are there in the 21st century skills. The skills we have at Harappa are basically 21st century skills. Critical thinking is one of the most important, communication, problem solving, creativity, all of these. So we've known all of this. And like I said, this is not new. It's as old as the human race. But we've crammed so much into the system that there is no space in our minds, in our classrooms, in the number of hours to teach some of this stuff. And it can at least be taught if the current subjects can be taught in a different way, that will also allow us to do this. So I think changing the way students are assessed and examined can also make a big difference. If you just don't test for rote learning, but you really ask them to apply their learning, then that in itself will solve a lot of the problems.
I think the whole thing has become so rigid in terms of academics that pedagogy has gone out of the window, and it's all about rote learning, because of that magic percentage that people have to reach.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Pramath, can you share the one thought that you'd like to have the listeners take away from this session as closing remarks?
David, firstly, thank you for having me. And it's been a very interesting conversation. And you brought a lot you've taken a lot of ideas out of my head already. So I don't know if I have more to say. I would only summarize it in one thought. And this is this notion that I believe anyone can do anything.
Right.
And education's purpose should be able to make people believe that, to be able to equip people to be able to do that, and then to put them on the path so that they can actually figure out what is it that they were meant for and keep at it. And I think that's really the heart of what all education needs to be about. So whether we are talking about new education policy, 21st century skills, high school education, college education, online education, Harappa education, really where we need to go back to is inculcate in people a belief that anyone can do anything. Obviously, I can't be a neurosurgeon and I can't be an astronaut and I can't become a player for Chennai Super Kings in IPL. But in the realm of what I can do,
right,
I can do anything and you can do anything and all of us can do anything. And we have to go back to making education being about that at the core. Thank you very much for having me. And I'm sorry to encroach on the next speaker's time if I have.
No, we still have 2 minutes left. And we should be thanking you for coming on to the Digital Premier League, and especially as the opening speaker. And
Thank
I
you.
think you've added tremendous perspective and value to the people who have been attending. And we hope that the recording will continue to carry your messages out to many other people as well. So thank you so much, Pramath. It was our privilege to have you.
Thank you, David. Thank you being for such a great host.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.